So it was back in late 1985. I was working in Central Fire Hall as a firefighter. I'd been on the job for about 6 years. My captain was Peter Harding, somebody who became a dear friend as my career went on. But Pete also helped as the superintendent of the St. John Ambulance. So he was quite a mixed background. And he came to me one night. I remember we had just finished dinner and he asked me into his office. He said, "Glenn, what do you know about food banks?" I had known nothing, and I told him so. So he told me that the day previous he had been at his office at the superintendent at St. John's, and a man had come up to him named George Dan, knocked on the door, came in, and said he'd like to talk to him about a food bank he was trying to get started at 772 Dundas Street. George and his partner Betty were working to try to get a food bank set up in London, Ontario, because they heard or had read in the newspaper that food banks were starting and they were interested in starting one. So Peter asked if I was interested. I wasn't. I was pretty busy doing my own stuff at the time, and but I told him that I would keep an eye on it and see what would happen. And then it was the next week that Mayor Tom Gosnell asked me to come into his office at City Hall, which I did. He had just come back from Edmonton, and Edmonton had the big city mayor's caucus there, and he was there. And part of what they did there for the 3 days was that they went for a tour of the Edmonton Food Bank. Now, the Edmonton Food Bank was started in 1984. It was Canada's first. And it was set up just by a bunch of volunteers that were trying to help out during the recession to help people that were food insecure. Tom went down and saw it, and he was a good friend. And so I listened to him carefully. And he said, "Glenn, do you think we need something like that in London? And if we did, would you be interested in getting it going?" So I told him about George and Betty Dan, that they had only just started it, but that I would go down and have a look and that I would get back to him. So I did. I went down the next week, and I took my daughter Christy with me, and we sat down and talked to George and Betty. And, they were doing their best, but George had been on disability, so he was struggling. It wasn't easy for him to do it. And this place at 772 Dundas Street was just a little hole in the wall, a small little place. And George was trying to get it going, but there had been some public interest. And he'd been able to get a few donations from certain groups. And that day I remember going around to Tim Hortons and picking up spare donuts that we would bring back and give out to folks as they came in. But it became pretty clear to me that this is going to be a real challenge. I said that I would be glad to volunteer and help because he asked for that. And then so the next week, Christy and I went down again. And after a short period of time, it became apparent that there were some difficulties that were going on there. So I remember I went back to Mayor Gosnell and I said, "Look, unless you can help or somebody can help, I think it's going to be a real challenge because you have to get the public on board." So he said, "Glenn, would you do it?" So I said, "Let me go down and talk to George." And when I did, George was unable to do it and go forward. So I remember going around to all the different social agencies that include Salvation Army Mission Services, St. Paul's, Daily Bread. And I talked to them about, did they feel that there was a need for a food bank? And I found that I had to explain food banks to them as I'd learned a bit myself that week. And they all said, "Look, at this recession's been really bad. Any help that you could give us to get us food would be really great." So I went to a number of different groups and spoke to them. And then I went back to the mayor's office and spoke to Tom. And I said, "Tom, there is a real need for food banks in the city. I'm willing to help to get it started. But what I'll do is I'll establish an official board with the treasurer, with the president, that kind of stuff. And I'll stay on to help get it started. And then after that, maybe they can hire an executive director." So Tom, who was terrific about all of this, said, "Anything you require, just let me know." And so that's how the whole thing got started. I went down the next week and started making contacts. But that was the original few weeks and months of the London Food Bank. It wasn't started by Jean and I, but it was clear that after being around for only a few weeks, it was going to have struggle. had real trouble being able to get through. And then George himself had some other things that he had to get going with. And that was that. I felt that unless we got in and got involved, that the food bank, as London did know, a new effort was not going to survive. So I thought, okay, I'll give it my best shot. We'll get it going. I'll ask some friends to come around and see if they can help out. Those friends, that was a long time ago. That was 38, 39 years ago. Many of those friends are still with us at the food bank to this day. But we had to cobble all that together and do what we can. And then what took place next was fantastic. So we've gone from there, 772 Dundas Street, what beginnings those were, that's 40 years ago, to here, today. So it's Christmas time here, 2025. And you can see this goes back a long way, right? The food coming from everywhere. We're very lucky. We're part of a provincial association of food banks, a federal association of food banks, and they too send food this way that we get out to other folks. It's really amazing. We've been in here for almost 20 years in this building, but we've had 4 buildings all together. This is the one we now call home, and we really like it. But you'll see later, if you went out back, I'll show you some drone shots later of what it's like out back with our greenhouse and with the gardens and the raised beds and the compost and the parking lot. There's just so much going on. We have our 4,000 volunteers, and not all here at once, obviously, but things are moving along. This is what the food bank has become. And you can go to any community in Canada and you'll see the same story being told over and over and over again. What was started as a temporary measure, which people thought would end when that recession ended in the 80s, has now become a huge part of even the food industry. It's a real growing concern. It's not what was supposed to have happened, but it's what we have, because public policy has failed to the degree that we've got now more and more people hungry than ever. In London, Ontario, we have 1 out of every 4 kids is food insecure. We help 40,000 unique individuals here at the food bank in London, and we also help about 6,000 families a month. A third of those people are kids, so we're targeting more and more towards those things. This is what food banks are. They're the community. Community's all down here, the 4,000 volunteers, all the compassion, the people who are in need, they all come in. The food bank is a remarkable thing. And you're about ready now to discover for the next 30 shows or so the history of the food bank, not just how it started, but how it evolved through. And you meet some of the key personalities. You might even meet some of the folks that were helped by the food bank, just see how it went. But this is the London Food Bank. This is what London has produced. Food banks are what Canada has produced to respond to real need of people that are hungry. We need to do better than this, but for right now, they're the engines that are really driving a lot of the compassion. We look forward to showing you a lot more over what happened over the last 40 years. So here we are now out in the parking lot of the food bank. It's always jammed here. There's lots going on because of all the volunteers. Over here in all of those areas, we have a whole compost operation. So a lot of the food that we get that's not so great, we put out there, and then it becomes compost, which is wonderful. Over here, though, this is really important. We have gardens all back in here. You'll see some of the little greenhouses and other things, but there is the greenhouse. Now, that was the first project we did when the pandemic hit. I had just come home. I just got off the plane from South Sudan in Africa, where Abuk is from, and I just got off the plane and somebody said, hey, there's a pandemic they're going to announce tomorrow, which is what happened. And all of a sudden, things began to change, and you'll hear more about that as we get to that as we go along. But one of the things we want to do is the city began to shut down, and it was getting really difficult. We decided we wanted to do something that would build up, do something that would be really big and different. So I was on CBC, and we announced that we were going to build a greenhouse. And hadn't thought of it before, but there it was. And we decided we were going to do that back here in the property. And then we had a group called LEUNA, which is an apprenticeship group for the trades organization. They brought some of their people out here. And with them and myself and Luis and John Fleming from the city, we put up the greenhouse. And it was great. But at the same time, there were many people in the community who were interested in the greenhouses and who wanted them. So what we did is we talked to Business Cares, and we went out, we bought a whole bunch of little ones that were 10 by 12. And then we gave those out to groups like churches and others so that each community could grow its own food.
That was a whopping success. You can see some of them back there, some of the spare ones that we have had. So that was great. But this greenhouse has revolutionized us as a food bank. It means we got a lot more fresh produce. There's heat in there, so it grows 24/7. And a lot of the food that we have in here goes to other agencies because they have trouble getting fresh food. And then here you'll see this building. Now, this is a drive shed. This was built a few years ago. So we parked some of our trucks in there, but in there we have growing labs. So those labs are testing out different seeds and other things for how we can grow things better, because we're working with the construction association here in town, and they're building us containers. These things are 40 feet long. You've seen these shipping containers before. They will also grow. We're going to get 5 of them. It's called Farm in a Box, and it's going to grow 24/7. Each one of those boxes grows 4 acres of food. So it's 20 acres of food is going to be built in something that's roughly that size. But we have a little lab that we've been experimenting with, and it's in there as well. So this is what's happened to the food bank. And it's all gotten this way. And the big story of it is not even here. The big story is in the heart of all of the volunteers that are here, but also in all of the agencies we assist. These are fundamental groups in this community that are tackling poverty at its deepest levels. That's not us. But we support them. And we find that we can help them stretch their dollars farther if we provide the food for the things that they do. This is the London Food Bank. It started at 772 Dundas Street. Oh, what a challenge that was. I mean, I had hair back then, but it was quite something. But look at it today. The volunteers that just come in, London has come in, they made it a staple, and we're really thankful. Early in the morning. This is Team Tomato and the awesome job that they're doing, all the stuff that's coming up. But we're about ready to go and see Luis because he's got something interesting going on. Oh, here we go. Going and see. My goodness, what happened here? It's a mess. Look at all of this stuff. Luis, what's going on here? All this stuff. How do you get around in here? What's going on?
We're producing lots of plants. That's what is going on right now.
Yeah.
So transplanting, planting, and multiplying plants. That's how it looks at the beginning of the season.
Yeah.
Later on, everything goes to the containers again. But right now, we're doing seedlings, and that's how you see all of this mess around. I'm so sorry about it.
No, it's good. It looks great. You're putting in some new lights, though,
yes,
correct?
So we're going to double our capacity for early production.
Yeah.
So we're going to have 5 more lamps. They were donated to the greenhouse.
Yeah.
And that will probably duplicate our production of seedlings for next season. So even more partners can join and do this with us.
Now you're also growing here a number of things for other groups.
Yes.
Helping them out. So that's the seedlings. So they'll come out and get them and then take them out to
and
their
then
place.
we come back to produce our little greenhouse.
Yeah, no, that's really awesome, Luis. But I mean, I think the lights are going to really increase the capacity, right?
Yeah.
And all the stuff that's going on. But Luis, it's such a mess. Hopefully you'll be able to clean it up somewhat.
Yeah, we will.
It's looking awesome, Luis. I also want to talk to you. I want to do another video. We'll talk about aphids. Can we do that?
Yes.
All right, let's do that. Thank you, Luis. Getting geared up, eh? It all looks good.
Food banks in Canada were not born of abundance. They emerged from a moral improvisation, a moment when a society quietly realized that the scaffolding it had built to protect its most vulnerable was being loosened, plank by plank. In the decades after the Second World War, Canada constructed a broad framework of social supports: unemployment insurance, social assistance, affordable housing, and a public health system that reflected a shared belief that hardship was a collective problem, not a private failing. Governments of all political stripes accepted that responsibility. Hunger, when it appeared, was treated as an emergency or an exception, not as a permanent feature of civic life. That began to change in the late 1980s. Economic restructuring, free trade anxieties, fiscal restraint, and a new ideological confidence in markets led governments to retreat from parts of that social framework. Benefits were tightened, eligibility narrowed, housing stock eroded, wages flattened while costs rose. None of this was announced as a moral shift. It arrived disguised as prudence. Food banks appeared first as stopgaps. They were first started in Edmonton, Alberta. They were meant to be temporary, practical responses to immediate need: church basements, volunteers sorting donated cans, neighbors helping neighbors through a rough patch. No one imagined they would become permanent institutions. They were not designed to replace public responsibility. They were designed to buy time while governments found their footing again. But that footing never fully returned. As the 1980s unfolded, food banks spread across the country, evolving from emergency responses into parallel systems of support. The need grew, not just during recessions, but during recoveries too. Hunger became less episodic and more structural, tied to low wages, precarious work, disability, and housing insecurity. Food banks adapted because they had to. What began as charity slowly became infrastructure. The London Food Bank is a clear example of this evolution. It was founded in the late 1980s as well, a time of uncertainty, and it grew alongside the city. As London changed, manufacturing declined, service work expanded, poverty became more dispersed, and the food bank changed with it. It professionalized operations, built networks with agencies, invested in logistics and data, and learned how to distribute food not as a gesture, but as a system. Yet its true engine was never efficiency alone. It was people. Volunteers became the quiet architects of its success. Retirees stacking shelves, students driving trucks, professionals giving evenings and weekends. Community donors sustained it through good years and bad. Faith groups, service clubs, businesses, and individuals treated the food bank not as someone else's problem, but as a shared obligation. The London Food Bank became a moral institution. It revealed what a society values when formal systems fall short. Food banks showed both the generosity and the limits of community action. They worked not because they solved hunger, but because they refused to look away from it as governments had done. And therein lies the quiet tension. The London Food Bank is evidence of civic decency, but also of civic failure. It reminds us that compassion can organize itself when policy does not. The challenge before Canada and before London is not whether food banks should exist. They must. But whether we are willing once again to build a society where they are no longer asked to carry so much of the load alone. This is the position the London Food Bank now finds itself in as it enters its 40th year.
a love that won't fade. From the hustle and the bustle to the streets that never sleep, I wanna sing a song of thanks to a city that runs deep. In the bright lights and the tall buildings where the stories unfold, there's a spirit of resilience, a heart of gold. Through the struggles and the battles, we stand strong. I wanna raise my voice and sing a gratitude song. Thank you, city of dreams, for all the love and all the hope you bring. Thank you, city of giving, for the countless blessings we're receiving.
We pay a high price when we permit our communities to be whittled down. Food banks, social agencies, caring businesses, and community associations are fighting for a culture, for a way of life. If you destroy what they built for their neighbors, for their communities, for the stranger, and for their children, then their hope is crushed and anger prevails. That's what some people seem bent on doing, but we can't permit it. It took 2 world wars and a depression to convince us to care for one another in more official ways. We can't let all that be wiped away in a generation. If these social and economic programs meant so much to us when we were young and vibrant as a nation, then they are even more essential now as we endure hard times. We must carefully guard all that we have inherited from a meaningful past. Caring for other citizens and providing opportunities for all to build their dreams have always been the visible evidence of a free people, of a compassionate people. Canada has always tried to provide the answer to what Martin Luther King said was the most pressing question of all. What are you doing for others? It is time to walk again in the direction of our dreams and to live the life we promised for our children. Along with our continued generous giving, we must fight for fairer policies, for a more understanding politics, and for communities that build on the common good again.
Hi, I'm Emma, and I want to tell you something kind of amazing. Kids like me are actually helping feed people in our community. For real. You might think food banks are just for grown-ups, but at the London Food Bank, kids are a big part of what makes it all work. We're not just watching, we're doing. At my school, we held a food drive. Me and my friends made posters, collected cans, and even went door to door in our neighborhoods with our parents, of course. We filled boxes and boxes of food, and guess what? That food went straight to families who needed it. Some of us volunteered too. We sort food, pack boxes, and help out with special events. It's fun, and it makes you feel proud, like you're part of something that really matters. And a lot of us get our parents involved, asking them to donate, coming with them to drop off food, or even giving a little from our own allowance. One of the best parts, we get our friends to help. Because when kids work together, we're powerful. The truth is, kids are essential to the London Food Bank. We bring ideas, energy, and big hearts. We might be small, but we're making a big difference. So if you're a kid watching this, yes, you can help too. Because hunger doesn't take a break, but neither do we. Let's keep feeding hope together.
We've been talking about the data that was collected by the end of 2024, just a couple of months ago, about what had happened all of last year. There were a lot of interesting figures that came from that, but one was my favorite. It wasn't the 1.6 million kilograms of food that were brought in during the course of the year last year. It wasn't even just the 3,000 volunteers that are on our database. That's at the food bank itself specifically. It's not about all what's out there in the community. The figure I perhaps loved the most was the amount of hours donated by volunteers last year in 2024 was 48,000 hours. That's what volunteers have done, and that's just at the food bank. You add in all the things that faith groups have done, that businesses have done, schools, cultural groups. It's amazing what has gone out there. All of these hours that were put together to help to bring food into the food bank and to help to sort it all and to give it out. It's an amazing thing. All the drivers, all the people that collect at the grocery stores. It's an amazing thing. The heart of the food bank is actually those volunteers. It's not the leadership. It's all the volunteers who just drive that and make it go forward. London is in the London Food Bank. And we really appreciate all of those efforts. If we could add the amount that all of the rest of you do out there in the community to help us, it'd be way more than 48,000. Thank you, London. Thank you to all of our volunteers. It's so special to us that in a time of such challenge and tariffs coming and everything else, we've got a volunteer army behind us that's going to help to see us through. We appreciate it, and I'm sure the city appreciates all your efforts as well. Thanks, everybody.